And let's put the agenda into the... Okay, welcome everyone to the first Kubernetes 1.20 release team meeting. This is week 1. My name is Jeremy. Before we get started, just a reminder, this meeting is recorded and will be available on the internet. This is a Kubernetes release team meeting, so we are bound by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which can be boiled down to be excellent to each other. Don't say anything that you wouldn't want said to yourself. So this is the first meeting, so I thought we could just start out by having all of the area leads introduce themselves and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your previous experience on the release team, and what you're looking to get out of the release this time around. And we'll start, as we always do, with enhancements, and Kirsten.
Hi, I'm Kirsten. I'm a software engineer at Red Hat, and I am the enhancements lead. I was a shadow for 2 release cycles, and then I was also a shadow on bug triage, I think my first cycle. And yeah, I guess I've really enjoyed working on enhancements before and getting to know all of the issues and stuff. So I just felt like it would be pretty cool to do it again and try to, lead a team. And yeah, I guess that's it. I just really enjoy working on the release team too. So it's like a bright spot in my week every week.
Awesome, thank you so much. I've dropped the agenda into the chat, so anybody that missed it, please add yourself as an attendee so we have a record of who's here. Next, we'll go to CI Signal with Rob.
Hello, I'm Rob. I'm in between contracts at the moment. I was a shadow on the 119 release team, and very happy to take up doing team lead for 120. So just want to say thanks to Dan for all of his support and help and sort of onboarding on 119 and for this release together with Dan and Jorge and Test Jennifer, we wanted to try and automate some of the reporting for the weekly meeting. So I've made a start on looking at that. There's some prior art there that I'm going to hopefully build on over this release. And I suppose the other thing that we want to do is to look at improving onboarding documentation for shadows and anybody who's interested in CI.
Awesome, thank you. Moving on, bug triage with Vlad.
Hey, I'm Vlad. I work on many things at Shopify, observability, search, and streaming. I've been a bug triage shadow for 119 with Gianluca. So this cycle, I'm happy to be leading bug triage. Exciting times. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. I see in here there's some numbers associated with PRs and issues. Have you gone through and done that, or did I copy that from the last time around?
That's me. I updated them a few hours ago.
Awesome, thank you. We can review those next time, and just thanks for updating the documents. We have that. Next up, docs with Anna.
Hey everyone. I've been a shadow since 1.17, I believe. Yeah, so I was a shadow for various roles, and I was able to become a lead this time for dogs. So I'm like super excited for this release, and I'm glad to meet everyone here and work with everyone. So.
Welcome back. Release notes with James.
Hi, my name is James Laverack. I'm a solutions engineer at JetStack, which is a Kubernetes consultancy over in the UK and Europe. I've been a release note shadow since 118, so a couple of releases now. And I'm looking to continue with the release notes ongoing automation, which is something that Relange is working on. So I'll be hopefully working with them to try and get that moved forward. And I'm looking forward to working with you all.
Awesome, thank you so much. Comms with James, or with Joseph, sorry.
Hey everybody. I know, exactly. I'm Joseph Sandoval. I am the SRE manager with the Adobe Advertising Cloud. So anything that is with platform tooling, making developers go fast with Kubernetes. It falls into my domain. I shadowed with Kubernetes 119 under Max, which was a really enjoyable experience. And the goal really was for me to I was going to try to see if I could bounce around, but I got asked to actually be the lead for this 120, which is kind of great and exciting because I think the knowledge that I have just coming off of 119, I think some of the other shadows experience, I'm hoping to kind of inject and really try to take some of those learnings and improve the experiences and help the individuals who are kind of going through the same things I was. So really excited about this. And then hopefully long-term goal is, I love hanging out with the overall release team, like Steven and all them. I've learned so much about the process. So just kind of enjoying just being involved in this aspect of it.
Awesome. Thanks for stepping up to do 120. Okay, release branch management with Carlos. No updates. Do you have plans for doing the 120 branch cut? When will that be?
Yeah, so far it's me, or together with Dan, but Dan is the lead shadow as well. I think they will not have time. Let's just me introduce for the new faces. My name is Carlos. I work on the SIG release since, I guess, release 115 as a branch manager associate. In that time, we don't have this role anymore. We have the branch manager shadow. We now have the branch manager associate because it's a little bit different from the entire release team. And since 116, I'm acting as a branch manager and helping you all to succeed in the release. I'm gonna help on the 120, maybe change in the future. We don't know. We are deciding who will be the branch manager for 120. But so far we are good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank
you. Lockie, can you give us an update on the shadow selection?
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Lachlan Evenson. I work at Microsoft as a PM. I have served in the Kubernetes release team. I've done from 114 through 116. I came back as an EA for 118, and now I'm back as 120. So excited to serve with you all. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. I'm very excited about this being the last Kubernetes release for the year 2020. We're going to go out with a bang. It should be a lot of fun. Excited to serve with you all. The role of the EA is really to support the team and bring any knowledge from past releases and context from how we've dealt with issues in previous releases. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on Slack. Happy to answer those questions. My main role for the first 2 weeks is really helping you all with shadow selection. So all the leads have been given access to the responses for the shadow selection applications. I would like you all to individually go through those responses and make your pre-selections and then work with me to finalize those selections. So I've given you all a couple of days to at least pre-select that list, but we would really like to get them finalized within the next week or so. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, or if you don't have access to that document, I can certainly help with that. And then any other questions you might have about this process, I'm happy to discuss that with the leads. And I'm just generally available for any questions. I'll be showing up to all the meetings and helping driving longer term processes. So I'm meeting Tim Pepper, who is the EA for 119 this afternoon. And he's going to be handing over a long laundry list of things, as is Laurie, of ongoing changes that we want to make in the release process. So if you have anything, feel free to ask. I'm here to help you all get through the 120 release, and excited to be serving with you all. So back to you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, Lockie. Okay, so now moving on. This is the point in the meeting where we would normally do the release lead update. I'll pause really quickly and let Dan and Nabarun introduce themselves. They're going to be 2 of the 3 release lead shadows. Savitha will be the 3rd. She is not available today, so she's not on the call. But Nabarun and Dan, if you could give just a brief intro on yourselves.
I think I'll go first.
Go for it, yeah.
Hi, everyone. So this is Nabarun. I have been involved with the release team since 1.17. 2 cycles as release shadow, then last cycle is, 2 cycles as enhancements shadow, and then 1 cycle as enhancements lead. And right now shadowing the release team lead. So glad to be back on the team for 1 more cycle. And yeah, we will end the year with a bang. That's all from my side.
Cool. That'll be awesome. Dan said he was on another Zoom, so he may not be able to chime in. So we can get him next time. In the chat, Kirsten mentioned she has an update for enhancements. So we can go back to that real quickly, and then I'll give an update on the calendar, and then we can move on to have Lori give us an update on project management stuff. So take it away, Kirsten.
So, hi, I'm Kirsten again. I basically this weekend was working on the enhancements tracking sheet, which I'm gonna like do a PR for the link probably today or tomorrow. I just wanted to get it into shape. Right now there's like 155 enhancements, and I basically went through all. I made the sheet. I went through all of them. I basically pinged all of them, and I kind of took a look at what was there, and I took some out because some of them were closed. And I also made some notes that like we do have a case of like a lot of enhancements are just like kind of blatantly unresponsive. And I'm thinking that it might be useful to add that as one of the drop downs for the, because we have the enhancement status drop down, and it's usually like pending inclusion, at risk, exception required, deferred, removed from milestone, tracked, and untracked. But I know that we're trying to optimize the enhancement process going forward. And I thought that it might actually be a good idea to just track the sort of non-responsive, because we do have open enhancements issues that are non-responsive for multiple release cycles. Mm-hmm. And I think like maybe indicating that somehow will potentially help us like optimizing in the future to see how many, you know, enhancements are just unresponsive once the release cycle kicks off, because I know that there's a lot of optimizations there. But then also it gives us a better way to track things that they're not going to respond. They're not responding. They haven't responded for 4 cycles. This issue is still open. It's just something that I was thinking about because I don't want like shadows to keep going through and like pinging things that, you know, if they've already been pinged like 8 times in the last 3 releases and I ping them again and they don't respond, you know, you don't really have to like ping them another 5 times during the release cycle. Yeah. Just a little more, I guess, granularity in the status, because unresponsive is a little bit different than just untracked. Like untracked is somebody saying like, no, we're not doing it, or, you know, we're not working on this for 1.20, but right. You know, unresponsive is a little different. So that's my status. I woke up and I have 50 emails now for my pings, so I'm going to go and update those as well. And it should be really good for the shadows, because I just thought that going through once and taking a look at all the enhancements and making sure they were, you know, alive and kicking before the shadows had to come and look at them would give us a good head start to the release cycle. So that's my update.
Awesome. Thank you. And that will lead us into my update. So the calendar for the release has been merged in with some tentative dates. Like these are always tentative as things progress. You know, we can always communicate changes if they're needed. But the big milestones to keep track of for 120 so far are enhancement freeze, and that'll be the first milestone. So Kirsten and her team will have a lot of work ahead of them for the next 4 weeks. Enhancement freeze will be on October 6th. Code freeze will follow on November 12th. That will be the week before KubeCon North America. The week after that is Thanksgiving in the US. So just with all of that stuff kind of in flight, we've decided to go with a 13-week release. Normally these are 12. Obviously 119 was a little bit of an exception to that, quite long. But the target release date right now will be Tuesday, December 8th. So that'll be after KubeCon. We'll have docs due a little bit before that. That'll be after KubeCon and Thanksgiving, just to give a little bit more flex for people to get those docs PRs done. If you have any questions or concerns about that, feel free to reach out to me or to the whole release team in SIG Release, and we can chat about those release dates. We have a SIG scalability update in here. Looks like there's a test infra issue. We can circle back offline with that. With that, I'll turn it over to Lori. Lori, can you introduce yourselves for anybody that hasn't met you before?
Sure.
And then go into your update.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lori Appel, and I'm coming to you from Berlin, Germany. I joined this world in April. I work for a company, it's in travel. So you can imagine how that goes with coronavirus. And so we went to half time, and that gave me more latitude to start helping out this community. And I do program management here, which is essentially trying to drive delegation, alignment, communication, and collaboration, as well as prioritization. So like helping this team prioritize work, build more sustainability into your workflow, also get more control over your workflow, and establish boundaries between the release cycle and with other SIGs so that you don't take on too many other SIGs work, actually at all. So with that last point in mind, I wanted to share some information with this group about an effort that I recently did that was mainly on behalf of the release team, but also the ecosystem generally, and that was to find out which SIGs are currently doing feature health checks. So the feature health check was an idea that actually SIGNode has created. They created a template a couple weeks ago where they did their own feature health check, which is basically to look at their KEPs and decide which ones they want to keep and which ones they want to move forward in 120 and which ones they might want to just close altogether. And so this seemed quite a great idea for sustainability and also giving the release team a bit of a heads up as to what to expect from them. So I've talked to all SIGs but 2 who didn't respond, and the data is in the link that you can click on in the agenda. So if you look at the notes, especially if you're in the enhancements team or also the release lead shadows, you'll find some interesting points there. There are some SIGs that already have some of their KEPs for 120 written down. So what are their intentions for 120? They've had meetings to figure that out. They have documented that information. And if they did, then they usually shared it. And I've put it in my notes for you to look at as well. And this is to give you a sense of what might be coming, to do a little bit of proactive planning. So if that's of interest to you, we can talk more about it online. But basically the goal is here to help drive responsiveness from the SIGs, and then by also, having them thinking about process as part of their everyday and engage in more conversations about that, but also transparency for all of us. Does anybody have any questions?
I actually have a question.
Sure.
If this, because there's 2 kinds of enhancements where the SIG has planned out this work and they're like, this is what we get behind, but then there are always other people who are pretty consistently opening up enhancements, which the SIG may or may not have, heard about or vetted or given the thumbs up. And I guess my question is, they have their list of things that are their priorities, but are they also committed to kind of regularly going through their SIG enhancement issues in the repo and basically saying no, we're not working on this release?
That would be a great follow-up question to ask them. Yeah. So that would overlap quite a lot with the triaging mechanisms. So a lot of SIGs are triaging issues, but that's rather broad. How are they triaging bugs and just other things that come through from potential contributors versus the KEPs that they have filed and that others have filed on their behalf. We didn't go into detail, but if that's helpful to you, then we should talk about it.
I think putting my enhancements hat on, I think that would be super useful.
Yeah.
There are, like Kirsten mentioned, there's a ton of them that people, they get approved. Obviously these things the KEPs have to be approved by the SIGs to merge in and stuff, but then we get to the code review or the code implementation phase of the release, and then we get to code freeze, and a whole bunch of things didn't get reviewed or they didn't get merged just because there wasn't a lot of bandwidth and priority from the SIGs. So I think it's twofold. One is prioritizing and committing to what enhancements are going to make it in, and then following through to make sure that the code reviews for those things happen and get done in time. It'd be great to not have the case with the sidecars KEP where that thing was approved and merged and was implementable for several releases, but then we would get to code freeze and we didn't quite get the review. We didn't quite get the review done. And then after we poked, because it was the 3rd or 4th time that it was going to miss, then we're oh yeah, actually this isn't something we're prioritizing right now.
Yeah, I mean, part of the keps are that like the kep.yaml file, like people have to specify the state, like provisional or implementable, and then they also specify the milestone. So I think that there's an expectation once the kep is actually like merged as implementable with a milestone, the kep holder does expect that they're going to be able to do the work in the milestone that they specified, you know, and maybe this means that they should be using provisional more and not letting people merge with a milestone as much. But there's definitely that, like, because it should be pretty straightforward. Like once the enhancements cutoff is there, I should expect that most of the enhancements, barring something happening to the enhancements owner, get merged. But there's this other thing, like Jeremy was saying, that happens where they think that they're going to get it in because it's been approved for 1.29 or 1.85 or whatever, and then there's nobody who's going to review it and actually let them merge. And I think that that's like the tension. So maybe provisional more often, maybe after the enhancements are all, you know, accepted, we go through and we're like, hey, these are all of the enhancements that you've approved for this milestone. Like, are you sure?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this needs a strategy behind it to
Yeah.
drive. We want to be proactive in getting ahead of this problem that we know already exists. So I'm open to having a conversation with you,
Cool.
Kirsten, and
Yeah.
maybe Nabarun wants to join. Jeremy, with your expertise and past experience, I would just keep it. You know, whoever else might want to join that wants to actually work on this, because it'll be a little difficult because we're talking about habit change and habit formation.
Yeah.
So, ping in the SIG release channel, and we'll take it from there and try to set something 30 minutes or so up.
I think that would be great. Thanks, Lori, for that update, and Kirsten for that input. Super, super helpful. Okay, moving on to open discussion items. Generally, in this part of the release meeting, we open it up. You can add any topics you want into the open discussion, and we can discuss them. I added one here to discuss time zones. So typically, we've not had very time zone friendly meetings for people that are outside of the US. It's getting late in the day for people in Europe. It's getting very, very late in the day for people in India, and it's even worse for anybody that's east of that. So we've discussed having in the past, like how we move towards more asynchronous release team actions and reporting, things like that. I think Lori and maybe Lockie and David McKay from a previous release are gonna start looking at some of that a little bit more in depth. But we thought as part of a starting effort for that, maybe we could think about having 2 release meetings. One that would be more friendly for everybody that's in the Asia Pacific area, and then maybe one that was better for US time zones. Because if we go too early in the US, it's gonna exclude people. If we go too late in the US, it's gonna exclude people that are not in the US. So it's really hard, I think, to hit all of the balancing points of the various time zones. Just having worked on a team at my day job that's in lots of geos, like it's really hard to hit those things for people. So what does everybody think about having 2 release meetings and then having some sort of asynchronous coordination between them to hand off if there are any action items or if there are any big reporting items that we need to do? I think generally as part of this release, we want to do more communication to the community. Around like when release dates are going to change and stuff, but also like when there are problems with CI signal, let's report those things out and do a little bit better job of getting things happening. And I think that all those things need to be asynchronous. Like those don't need to occur in the release team meetings. So I just wanted to open it up to see what people think. Are there people that would be in favor of doing a release meeting in the non-US time and then coordinating with us to hand it off? I'll open it up there if anybody has any feedback or any thoughts around that.
General question, are you running the meeting in APAC time or someone else?
So it will probably be somebody else.
Okay.
I would look to maybe Nabarun since he is in that time zone. Do you feel like you could take on running an Asia Pacific centric meeting, Nabarun?
Yep, we could. So we already have a SIG contributor experience APEC coordinators meeting, which actually happens at 5 UTC, which actually was suited because it could cover New Zealand time as well, which was for them it would be like evening-ish, and for Europe slash Middle East it would be like early morning-ish, like 6, 7, something like that. So that was tuned so that the Eastern Hemisphere can at least attend those meetings and have Apex-centric discussions. I think we can try to pull it off. The only apprehension I have right now is that we have not traditionally been very async, right? So it's like a cultural change inside the team that we need to bring in. How do we communicate more effectively? So we can drive a meeting, that's completely possible. Just that we need to figure out the communication part, like how does the handover occur? How do we not discuss duplicate items on both the meetings? And how are the thoughts being considered from both sets of people? Obviously, like in this time, I can attend both the meetings. At the current state of the meeting, it's like 10:30 p.m. It's 11 p.m. for me right now. So yeah, to answer your question shortly, I can drive the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously 11 is not ideal for anybody to be dedicating time. Expecting the shadows to do that is also rough, I think. So I think personally, I think it would be good if we could do another meeting that would be more friendly and handle some of that asynchronous communication. I think it also might be telling and instructive for us to start laying down some more just general, how does the release team work in an asynchronous manner? We can try some things out, see if they work. If they don't work, we can course correct and make some changes. It's not the end of the world if we have to make some changes. So I think one thing we can do is send out a doodle to kind of gather times for both the US one. Is this a good time or is this not a good time? And then for the Asia Pacific centric time, I can send one of those out today, unless anybody has any other concerns or thoughts.
I have one concern. If it's just you, Jeremy, and Nabarun running those meetings, like I'm worried that, if Nabarun is out sick one day or something, like who's gonna fill that role? Just something to think about, I guess. But just in general, I don't have any problem with it. I think we should try it out to see how it works. But go ahead, Lori.
Yeah. No, thanks. I don't want to interrupt you, so if you have more to say, please continue.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, cool. Maybe the idea is to have the shadows responsible for the sync happening, so that if Nabarun gets sick, that someone in the meeting is already ready and prepared to step right in and do it, so that Nabarun is also helping other folks with their leadership skills and running these meetings and being part of this handover process. And if you look at it like that, then it doesn't become like one person must do all.
So I have a question.
Oh,
sorry. Sorry, go ahead. Like, I think I interrupted someone.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so the current team stands as it like the release lead is in US-centric time zone. 2 of the 3 shadows are in US-centric time zone, and 1 shadow is in East Hemisphere-centric time zone. So do we delegate? So in a scenario where I am not able to attend the meeting for some reason, do we delegate it to a shadow of other teams, or like?
Yeah, there'd have to be like some order to that chaos.
Yeah, I think we can, once we select the shadows, we'll have a better idea of what the team makeup's going to look like. And I think we can identify people to be the backups to run the meetings once we've identified who's going to be on the shadows. Like if we end up not having any shadows that are in that time zone, then maybe this doesn't make a lot of sense. Like looking at the numbers, I think we'll end up with some that are in that time zone, and we can work on making sure that there's coverage. I mean, I think to Lori's point, this is a great way of just leveling everybody up. And it's not traditionally like the role of like the enhancements shadows or the bug triage shadows to run these meetings, but it is part of their remit to do a part of the meeting. So we can always be flexible about how we end up doing these updates. Like maybe we get to the point where we don't actually need to do these meetings as much, and we're just getting towards asynchronous updates and only having the meetings if there are problems, like the CI signal problems of the end of 119. Like those needed to be discussed. Like the week to weeks where we're just like, oh, enhancements doesn't have any updates this week because enhancements freeze is over, code freeze is over. Like, you know, I think we get to the point where there are only pieces that may need to have active discussions, and we can think about how we restructure how the meetings run.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
like I think
that,
it's.
Oh,
Oh, no, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To that point, I'm thinking that there are like when you structure the meetings, there are teams that are complementary to each other that might have to have more discussion. Like I think enhancements and maybe the docs, there's like overlap there. We use the same sheet. They're going to get the docs for the enhancements that we're working on. So I would just keep in mind like the complementariness of who absolutely has to be in a meeting. And even though shadows can be in the meeting, sometimes the lead might need to be in the meeting as well. But I think like for leads, it's like, who is the like, is there a group that you usually talk to? Is there a group that you usually have to communicate or really care about, and trying to reconcile like the meetings with those people could also be helpful, like in terms of just like the web of like we're all connected, but some of us are more connected than others. So trying to keep in mind like, hey, Anna, I might actually need to talk to you in the meeting, or if you're not available, I might have to try to schedule a meeting with you. And maybe that's also something like talking to each other.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah. Plus
outside
one
of
to
the meeting
that.
as well. Yeah. So.
I mean, it's sort of like, how do we, two questions to think about is like, what is more important, having a release lead always run all the meetings or shadow, or that the meeting just happens and that you have more people in one of these meeting clusters, you know, the time zone specific, the two different meetings for the different time zones, like having more people in both of those meetings, just being able to run a meeting and know what to do and know how to like facilitate conversation about follow-up and things of this nature. Like it's empowering to have more people in the group being able to just run the meetings, because this means that you get practice for being a release lead at some point. And also it just, it's a good exercise in delegation for everybody. So there's that. And then the other thing is that we have a leads sync on Mondays, and so we had the conversation about like making the release team more proactive and less reactive, and reporting things. So you know, there's a question of like, what do we actually have to communicate in a meeting, versus what do we just have to make sure we communicate, and maybe a meeting itself isn't the right framework for like a status update, but something like Kirsten, what you're saying, a discussion with enhancements and docs about complex matters, that might need a meeting, but then again, does it need everybody involved in this group? You know, maybe you just have a breakout, or you structure that, or you time box some time in advance during this meeting for your conversation, and then people can drop off if they don't want to join. So it's some tricks like that, you know, but
well, at work we have like meetings that are on the calendar, and like for those meetings we have like an agenda that we have open ahead of time. And
yeah,
I mean that could be what we also use a little bit more than just like hey, I have this many bugs or this many thises, but actually use the agenda. So like Nabarun knows like, hey, I actually might want to attend this other meeting not in my time zone because they're discussing something that's important to me. Because you kind of don't know what you're missing sometimes. Like if you're not sure what's going to be discussed, and if that lead specifically might want to actually be in the meeting, and like, I'm going to stop talking.
Right. No, this is a great point. Like the only thing we'll have to figure out through this handoff process is making sure that that agenda gets looked at by somebody in advance. You know, whether it's the lead who can or can't join the meeting, or someone else who's delegated that task of making sure that the agenda has things in it and isn't blank. But we can see how that goes.
So if I can make a suggestion, one of the things that I'd like to see happen more on the project in relation to dealing with asynchronicity is, and I'm coming from a CI signal point of view here, from a task point of view. I see the worldwidiness as an advantage generally, insofar as that the people in Asia Pacific get first bite of the cherry when it comes to finding flakes and reporting them, and that then that basically there's a follow the sun hunt for flakes, and essentially in terms of capturing the activity, our work is GitHub issue based, and what I want to be able to see from the point of view of handover, what I want to be able to see is leveraging of project boards in order to go, okay, right, what is the state of play here with respect to where we are with the reported flakes? Let's walk the board here. So my expectation is that from the people who are up first when they log issues, that I see those updates on the board, and that I then I'm in a position to walk that board and log issues myself, and then hand that over to the US as they're getting up. So I'd like to see, so rather than it, and this kind of speaks to using a meeting for what a meeting is good for, and that is having a chat about something that's onerous, tricky, or we need to get some heads together and fix a problem. But in terms of day-to-day operations of this train, as it were, there is natural asynchronicity recording traps in terms of issues and in terms of boards, that I think that it might make more sense to point to in meetings to say, here's a status update, rather than manually updating a document in Drive.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that kind of naturally leads into our next discussion item, if we want to move on. Lori has asked, are there any objections to using the project board, and walking the board? And we actually used to do this in the release meetings. I don't think we did it much or at all in 119, but in previous releases, I know we would walk the board, which is why there's a project board link at the end. I definitely think that it would be good to do that more proactively. I think one of the things we also took away from the 119 retro was that there were some things that would get reported in these meetings and needed to be actioned and like carried forward, and we didn't really do that all the time. Mm-hmm. So kind of along those lines, I've added an action items section at the top of this document. So when there are things that arise in this meeting that, that like would be good to status and follow through, I think we should add them to the project board, and then have a record of like what issue on the project board is that decision, and kind of follow through in the meetings to make sure we get it resolved, and not, we don't say, hey, this is a problem, and then it kind of falls off.
I have an iteration on that, which would be that when we note an item that needs to have follow-up, that an owner pops up during the meeting and makes the GitHub issue.
Yeah. So
yeah,
the action item thing I put in has owner and GitHub issue, so we can make sure that that's tracked in.
But if we're using the project board,
we
can also see, we don't need the list. We'd only need it for issues that don't get an owner. So that would help with the tracking, because the list, when we had a similar conversation at near the end of last cycle, where it was like, if we have a list of things, then how do we see the updates easily? With the board, you can do it. We just have to make sure they show up. I think it's automated anyway for the release team for them to show up with the settings. Do you want to try the board or your list, or a combination of both?
Let's try the board. I think that'll be.
Does anybody have?
I think one of the weaknesses of the board. Sorry to cut across you there, Larry, but
no worries.
One of the present weaknesses of the boards right now is that they're not end user filterable very well. So if you're used to boards from other platforms, you might be going, oh, these are a little bit basic. One of the things that I'm seeking to do this time around is to build on work that I don't know Elena's surname off the top of my head, but a previous CI Signal shadow did some work on reporting what issues were on the Flakes reporting board and the CI Signal board, as I look at that code now with the review of automating the weekly report and effectively making it an asynchronous dashboard, there's a couple of nudges that I want to be able to put into that report in relation to grouping issues by SIG, etc., and grouping issues by status, whether they're just reported or reported and triaged, or there's a fix in motion or whatever. So if anyone's interested in that sort of level of automation, I think possibly I should log an issue to kind of track that work actually. And yeah, let's just start doing it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can go on the project board.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel the need to write that down on a list before I do that. So,
yeah, go ahead.
I might do that. Yeah. Otherwise I'll forget,
I mean, a lot of the items on the project board in 119 were some of them are pretty large and long-term issues. And with a release team, you're talking about a tighter cycle. So I think for the board to make any sense, we would need to think about what do we want to do with those longer-term issues that affect the release team specifically. And what about all these little other things that come up that we should just track that will be easier to track in GitHub issues that, that we'll see actually moving from left to right and making progress to get done.
Yeah.
Because also a bit demoralizing to see a bunch of items that don't move week after week after week, and obviously this team achieves a lot. So maybe the board should be used for shorter term items that we know we can actually deliver on during the cycle proper. And then it would be obviously that we would use it. Does anybody have any objections? Or go ahead.
Don't drop those long-term items though. Make sure that they get on a project board for SIG release.
Yeah, nobody drops anything here. We would just push, that was what I was thinking. They would go to SIG release, but let's see if that's actually the most reasonable approach. It might be that they would just stick in the backlog column for the release team, but there'd be a lot of other smaller items that will move faster through the weeks that we would mainly keep our eyes on.
I'd like to see most of them go to SIG release, because there are people in SIG release who aren't on the release team who might actually deal with those longer term items if they know about them.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well. It seems like these are broader policies and process issues.
If we can do like what we did on what the test infra team did for us on CI Signal, which was to formulate policy change and have umbrella issues and have subtasks hanging off them. If we can achieve that, then we could capture that sort of long-term goaliness of big projects. But if we can do a breakdown, then we can say, okay, let's bite some things off and get things done in this cycle.
Mm-hmm. I think think about what could go wrong if we push those longer-term release team items to the SIG release board. Can we think of any reason why we should not do that? And then maybe I can reach out to you all again on the channels to say, like, have you thought of anything? And you can post there as a reminder. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. We do have a release team subproject in SIG release, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think those longer term things might make sense to land there. With that as the owner.
Oh, I think you asked if we have a release team subproject, but maybe you meant the SIG release.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, have them land in the SIG release project board, but then we can work with the release team subproject.
Oh, got it. Yeah, that's also possible. And it could just be its own column of longer term things. And if they start to move forward, then they would be treated like any other issue. but we will have them at least in a visible place for this team. That seems like a reasonable compromise.
Rob, do you have your hand up still? Okay. Just saw you in the participants with your hand up, so I wanted to make sure.
That was ages ago.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Did we steamroll past you?
Kind of, yeah. I think I was kind of like, is this thing working? Yeah.
Okay. So everybody clear on the resolution that I think we've pitched here? If not, I'll say again, longer term items will go to the SIG release board for the SIG in its entirety, but the release team board will also have the same items that are release team specific, but just in a column for like longer term backlog items. And then we'll use the board mainly for tracking the shorter term items.
I think it makes sense, especially if there are longer term items that, like, say Rob has an idea and he doesn't get to fully implement it while he's the CI signal lead. If it's tracked somewhere else, then he might also be interested in continuing to work on it later. But it's kind of like, if you just box it onto the team specifically, then it kind of feels like, well, it's over, so I guess that's somebody else's thing, and it feels a little weirder. So it's like, yeah, having them tracked in both places could also let people like continue to maybe make the improvements that they didn't have the time or capacity to do in the actual release cycle.
And I think that aligns well with Josh's point about some people might want to work on these items, but they're not in the release team in that given cycle, but they can still see them, and it's
exactly
from the board. Okay, so this sounds promising.
Cool. I think that was a really productive first meeting. Lots of good discussion stuff. Anything else we want to discuss on using the project boards? We can start doing that next week. Start working the board at the end. Cool. We will start that next week. Last thing, really, the retro document is linked here. So as we go through the release cycle, when things pop up that you think we're doing really well, or things that we're not doing so well, please add them to the retro so that we don't forget them. And we have them tracked. You know, like, I think we had a lot of good stuff on the retro for 119, and I think part of that was people added them as we were encountering difficulties, or we didn't have a lot of like what went well in the 119 retro. So if you notice things that are going well, please add them so that we have happy things to talk about as well at the end of the cycle. All right, with that, I'll open it up. Any other topics that anyone would like to bring up or discuss that's not on the agenda now? If not, I'll give you 10 minutes of your time back. And if you, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just ask a question? Just a quick question. I signed up for the 120 shadow, and I'm kind of curious about like the shadow elections. So that will happen like in recent 1 or 2 weeks, I assume. And like it will send out an email for confirmation. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So today, the application closed on Friday, and today Lockie sent out a list of all the applicants to the different leads. So Rob and Anna and Kirsten and James and Joseph and Vlad will be going through that right now, like starting this week, starting today. And ideally, we'll try to have all of the selections done by the end of the week and notify everybody so that we can get everybody on board for next week.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks for applying. Happy to have everybody join us and be interested in the release team.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I'll give you back 10 minutes of your time, and everybody have a fantastic Monday, whatever's left of it in Aberun.
40 minutes.
Have a good evening. Yeah.
Go to bed.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Take care.